Good morning, everybody. Welcome on this webinar on the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation and the Digital Passport, Product Passport, actually. So my name is Magali Mine. I'll be your host for today, and a warm welcome to everyone. This series of 6 webinars is a series that's on the European Textile Strategy and the European Green Deal. The session of today is part of that. So just to freshen your mind a little bit, the European Green Deal, that is the growth strategy that Europe handles to become climate neutral by 2050. And the European Textile Strategy is a part of that. The European Textile Strategy is a vision to ensure that by 2030, textile products that are being placed on the European market are, among others, long-lived, recyclable, and produced in respect of social rights and the environment. Both the European Green Deal and the European Textile Strategy will transform the textile sector as we know it today. It will have a huge impact on production, consumption, on sale, but also disposal of textiles. And it will come with regulatory demands. And so with this webinar series, of which the session of today is a part, we really aim at helping to inform you what's coming up, how our upcoming legislation is going to be translated in obligations for you, how will that transform the industry as we know it today, and how will your company most likely be impacted? So we aim at informing you, but we also extend a very warm invitation to join the discussion. So should you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to use the chat box down below. There is an icon of a chat where you can just type your questions away, and our experts and my colleagues will be monitoring those questions, either providing an answer straight away, or we take that along during the Q&A. So don't hold yourself back and fire away your questions, because we really want this to be an informative session for you all. If I say we, then I aim at 3 different organizations. This webinar is a joint organization of the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles, of Green Button, and also of GIZ Fabric. The Partnership for Sustainable Textiles is a multi-stakeholder initiative in which different stakeholders like brands, retailers, civil society, the German government work together to really transform the industry towards a more sustainable reality. The Green Button, on the other hand, is a government-run certification label, also for sustainable textiles. And then GIZ Fabric is another organization that's promoting an environmentally friendly, social and competitive textile and clothing industry in Asia, specifically. They have their Fabric series, which is a technical seminar actually for manufacturers to really dig deep into key issues in the sector. It's not only trainings, it's also consultancy sessions. And so this webinar is a joint organization by those 3 organizations. So a lot of information is coming your way. We truly hope it will be informative. Well, it will be informative, but so don't hesitate to ask any questions. The focus of today is on Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation, the ESPR, and the Digital Product Passport. We aim at providing you with a framework, a general understanding of what's coming up, also giving an insight in what requirements are to be expected for brands, suppliers, stakeholders, and also to give you insight in the practical adoption of the Digital Product Passport. Very practically, this session is being recorded, so it will be published publicly later on. Your camera won't show, so don't worry. Please keep your cameras on, make it cozy, see who's there. It's always nice to have a bit of an understanding of who's joining, so no worries there. The session is recorded, but you won't show on that recording. So I have a lot of colleagues actually in the background who are supporting this session. And with respect to your questions, we have Judith Künnert and Kathleen Möhling from GIZ who will be monitoring your questions together with the organizations. There they are. So Kathleen and Judith will be there to answer your questions together with the expert. And we also have Nazia Quintanilla from GIZ Fabric, who is actually also co-moderating this session with me. So thank you all for being here. And then we can have a look at the program of today. So if all goes well, that will be showing just now. We will have 3 experts for you today who will give their point of view on the topic. So we have an expert who's going to shed light on where are we at with respect to the regulations. Then we have someone who's going to really dig into that digital product passport. And then last but not least, someone who's going to shed a reflection on how well are we prepared actually today. Before we dig into all the beautiful content we have for you, I would like to ask one question to you, just to get a little bit of a feel for what your expectations are for this session. I want to extend this poll, and if all goes well, it will show up in the chat for now. So the question is actually, what are your expectations for today? Are you just listening in to learn more about what ESPR is about? Are you looking for answers on specific questions you might already have? Or is there anything tangible, like an action or so, that you're looking for and that you would like to take home with you? So I'm just going to have a look here. What's going on? All right, so most of you, as I can see, are here to listen in, to learn more, to just get information of what's going on. And then we have also quite a lot of people who hope to take home tangible actions. So that's good to know. Good to know you're there to learn and to really take messages home with you. I know we won't disappoint you. All right. So thank you very much for your input there. And without much further ado, I have the honor of introducing our first guest to you. Our first expert is Tim Becker. Tim Becker is a senior legal advisor at Reach Law. Tim joined Reach Law back in 2008 and has been a legal counsel at Reach Law since then. His global client base ranges from chemical legislation, so the REACH, to the latest EU initiatives targeting sustainability. And Tim is going to focus on the European proposal for Ecodesign for sustainable product regulation. What does that entail? Where is the proposal at today? What is the scope of that regulation? And most importantly, maybe, what will be the impact when we go live? So Tim, the floor is entirely yours.
Thanks a lot, Magali. Welcome from Helsinki. I will just quickly share my screen. See it? Okay, so yeah, I will give you an overview of the Ecodesign for sustainable products regulation, which is upcoming, and its impact for textiles. First, a few words about our company. I'm working with a consultancy company called Reach Law. We are headquartered in Helsinki. Company was established back in 2006. Other than the name suggests, we are actually a multidisciplinary team of experts. So I'm a lawyer, but we also have chemists, business specialists, and so on. And what we essentially do is that we provide specialist services, helping companies, for example, to register their chemicals under the EU REACH regulation or other similar laws outside of EU, And we also provide other consultancy services for companies and also governmental agencies to help them tackle chemicals, products, and waste regulations. So here you get a little idea of our regional scope. So everything started a few years back in the EU, and nowadays we also have offices in the UK, Turkey, India, and Korea, and also in Brussels, of course. And the essence of our work is really that we specialize in chemicals regulatory compliance and also the emerging field of sustainability. So here you see the agenda in terms of contents for my talk. So I will give you hopefully a useful overview of the upcoming requirements of ESPR. We'll also then shed some light, of course, how this will particularly impact textile products, or is likely to impact. And then I will give you some outlook on the next steps and how the industry can prepare at this point. Still a preliminary remark. This presentation is based on the ESPR final text, as was provisionally agreed on the 4th of December last year between the Parliament and the Council. So it may well be that there are still some changes occurring due to the formal revisions and prior to the adoption of the ESPR, which is expected very soon. So if in the future ESPR should be adopted, then of course please refer to the final text, which may not be what I present to you today, but more or less it will be the same. Okay, so ESPR at a glance, what is it all about? ESPR will be a new European Union regulation, which is establishing a framework for setting eco-design requirements for sustainable products, and it will repeal the existing eco-design directive. Yeah, so basically, ESPR will set eco-design requirements, which all the products placed on the EU market will have to comply with in order to improve their environmental sustainability, and in order to make sustainable products the norm in the EU, reducing the environmental and carbon footprint over the entire life cycle, and also to ensure free movement within the internal market. So the eco-design requirements are at the core, and in addition, we will have under ESPR the introduction of the famous digital product passport. We also have some provisions on mandatory green public procurement requirements. And also very interesting and relevant for textiles is the framework to prevent unsold consumer products from being destroyed. I will come back to that. So the details of eco-design requirements are going to be specified in European Commission delegated acts for specific product groups according to a working plan. So this is all still in the future at the moment. So I can only outline the framework, but we can already tell that ESPR will, of course, affect products from both inside the EU and also imported products. Exclusions from the scope of ESPR are very limited and maybe not so relevant for textile products, so I don't go much more into the detail there. In the final text, it was clarified furthermore that second-hand products, including repaired ones originating from within the Union, do not need to comply. So we only talk about new products placed on the market. And also important to highlight that ESPR only regulates environmental sustainability to start with, so social aspects are not dealt with under ESPR at the moment. But the Commission should evaluate the inclusion of those social aspects after 4 years after entry into force. So yeah, there is a lot to digest already in terms of papers, ESPR, legal text, and more is to come. So we have at the moment as a food for reading the ESPR final text, which was published just a bit at the end of last year. You can find some numbers here displayed. What is also useful is to go back and look into the Commission proposal of 30 March 22 and also the impact assessment, which was done by the Commission as part of this. And now what is to come? As I already said, we have to wait for the adopted published text, which will come probably by the end of this quarter, or anyway, first half of 2024. We will also have to expect further consultations and impact assessments, and then of course the delegated acts and implementing acts to make ESPR work in practice. For duty holders, there will also be some bureaucracy coming up. I mentioned here conformity assessments, technical documentation, the digital product passport, labels, all those topics will have to be addressed and are addressed in the ESPR regulation. Now here you see an overview of the ongoing or of key ongoing initiatives affecting textile products under the European Green Deal. So of course I cannot go into the fine details of all those other initiatives. So ESPR is only one of many initiatives to enhance the sustainability of products, but also companies. On top of the table, you see the regulations governing chemical safety, which are REACH and CLP, so they are already in force, and the revision activities are currently ongoing. Then I should maybe highlight the regulation on textile labeling from 2011, which many of you will already be familiar with. And here's maybe good to highlight that there's also a review ongoing at the moment, and a public consultation is open for stakeholders to provide input to this review until the middle of April. On the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, you have already heard webinars as part of this series, so I don't go into details with those. Then there are some other directives, which are the Green Claims Directive and the Directive on Empowering Consumers for the green transition. So these directives are basically addressing the issue of greenwashing. And I understand you will also have another webinar as part of this series for those topics. And last but not least, there are some directives and the regulation dealing with the treatment and management of waste. And also here I refer to the future webinar part of this series. So we can really see there is a lot ongoing at the moment, and everything is basically under review. And we really have to see how is this all going to work out. Now for the eco-design requirements, there are a number of product aspects which I want to introduce. So energy use and energy efficiency was only the beginning under the Ecodesign Directive, and now ESPR introduces a number of additional product aspects which are basically defining what is understood under environmental sustainability. So now what was added is water use and water efficiency, and also other resource use and resource efficiency. Then what the Commission is now focusing on are durability, possibility of recycling, and recycled content. Then further to that, very important are the regulations on the presence of substances of concern. So that should be addressed as part of the delegated acts and the digital product passport. And then you have a number of product aspects which are basically also aiming to enhance the longevity of products, so reliability, repairability, and so on. Last but not least, you have environmental impacts to be regulated, including carbon and environmental footprint, and also the expected generation of waste. So overall, I think we have 16 product aspects that can be regulated under ESPR. As for so when we talk about how to develop eco-design requirements under the ESPR, we have to see that there will be dedicated impact assessments and stakeholder consultations for the product groups in order to define those requirements. Here you see a list of basically negative criteria. So there are a number of criteria in the ESPR basically that should be fulfilled, or what should basically not happen when eco-design requirements are adopted. So for example, there should be no significant negative impact on consumers in terms of affordability, and of course there should be no disproportionate burden on the industry from those requirements. And to make sure that balanced regulation is achieved, there will be an eco-design forum, and this eco-design forum will include experts from the industry, NGOs, but also other stakeholders, and they will basically help the Commission in defining those eco-design requirements. SMEs may also receive financial support from the Commission. And a new element now introduced in the legal text is the Member States Expert Group, which is also formally a part of the Ecodesign Forum, but can also have separate meetings. What are the types of eco-design requirements? So we have, on the one hand, performance requirements, and on the other hand, information requirements. And those two requirements can be part of product-specific regulation or horizontal requirements. So for textiles, we may also expect those horizontal requirements, which can cover several product groups which have sufficient technical commonalities. So the performance requirements, they can be of quantitative nature, like minimum recycled content, or they can be non-quantitative. For example, there can be restrictions on certain substances which are bad for the circularity. And then on the information requirements, we have the requirements on the digital product passport, the substances of concern, and additional information as appropriate to enhance the sustainability and the circularity of the products. For the substances of concern now, the Commission or the ESPR final text clarifies what is the definition comprising. So there are three types of substances of concern, or three groups. The first group is the candidate list substances under the REACH regulation. Then the second group is substances which have certain hazards, which are harmonized according to CLP. So there's here you can see the overview of the human health hazards and also the environmental hazards. And what was now still added as compared to the Commission proposal is the substances regulated under the persistent organic pollutants regulation. And then the third group of substances of concern is substances that negatively affect the reuse and recycling of materials in the products in which they are present. And these substances, they should be identified in the Commission delegated acts when making the eco-design requirements. And I have highlighted here with the asterisk the substance or the hazards which are already considered to be restricted in textiles to be regulated based on the information we have from the Joint Research Center. So it looks like we are facing quite significant restrictions here. For the digital product passport, this is of course a huge topic under ESPR, but I will have to refer to the presentation by Romain in the next talk. But yeah, DPP will basically be the future information system of the circular economy. Maybe what I could highlight is what was still added now in the final text was the web portal. So the European Commission has to establish a web portal in order to provide access to digital product passport information to stakeholders, companies, consumers, and also authorities. A big topic for textiles will be the destruction of unsold consumer products. And here we have a dedicated chapter in ESPR. To start with, there will be a general principle to prevent destruction. So this basically applies to all the economic operators, regardless of their company size. And then second, now introduced by the co-legislators, is the destruction ban in Article 20A and B. And it will apply initially to apparel and clothing accessories and footwear. And you find the precise product list in Annex 7A of the ESPR. And now, in regards to the destruction ban, the Commission should develop a delegated act within 1 year, so expected by 2025, which could then include possible additional products and also some exemptions, so where this ban would not apply. And initially, this destruction ban will apply to large enterprises after 2 years, and then to medium-sized enterprises after 6 years, so by 2030. Then third, we have a disclosure obligation, so to enhance transparency, a disclosure obligation on discarded unsold consumer products. And also here, Commission has to make an implementing act within 1 year, which will provide further details on how this disclosure obligation is to be fulfilled. And then the economic operators affected have to report or disclose annually. And for the first time, the disclosure is required in around 2026. And also here, initially, this will only apply for large enterprises. And then medium-sized enterprises, it kicks in by 2030. So micro and small enterprises, which is important for textiles, are exempted from those specific obligations, destruction ban and disclosure obligations. I have here reflected in the table the applicable figures from the SME recommendation. So that gives some relief for SMEs. And then we have economic operators. So basically, these are the duty holders under ESPR. These are the manufacturer, the EU importer, distributor, and the dealer. And so basically, the principal duty holders under ESPR will be the manufacturers who have to fulfill ensure the eco-design requirements are met, and also the DPP, the data for the DPP are gathered. And then, of course, for imported products, it will be for the importers to ensure the product compliance before placing on the market. And then further down in the supply chain, distributors and dealers have to ensure also that the eco-design requirements are fulfilled for the products, and that the customers, in case of dealers, have access to the relevant information. So what is important to highlight here is that the manufacturer definition is not explicitly limited to EU entities. So that means that also non-EU actors will have a role here to play under ESPR. How will the enforcement look like, and who will be in charge? So here you find like a map of the applicability of ESPR, the territory, is, of course, the EU and potentially the EEA countries, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. Maybe also Northern Ireland will be in the scope of ESPR. I cannot go much into the details here, but applicable provisions on enforcement are in the market surveillance regulation from 2019. Then there are also some new provisions now in ESPR to complement this. And then the member states will have to set out the penalties for non-compliance, which also have to include proper fines. The key authorities for enforcement will be the market surveillance authorities in the member states, then the customs authorities to check compliance for imported products. And then we will have an administrative cooperation group of the market surveillance activities to coordinate priorities and activities. And also the European Commission will have an important role to play. The additional enforcement tools are, there will be a Commission product passport registry, and also a new provision now included is private enforcement, which means that the consumers will have a right to claim compensation if they get a non-compliant, or basically if they suffer a damage from non-compliant products with the ESPR. And they will have this right to claim compensation against the product's manufacturer, the importer, or the authorized representative. Okay, now for the textiles. So they will come actually one of the first product groups to basically get a delegated act under the ESPR. So notably garments and footwear should be addressed now in the first delegated act for textiles. But what is still to be confirmed is the precise product scope. What kind of subgroups are covered are to be covered in the first delegated act for textiles. So basically, we can clearly see also from the Commission impact assessment that textiles and footwear have really the highest environmental impact today, in terms of many categories that have been assessed. So amongst all the products which have been now prioritized for first action, the textiles are on top. And as I already mentioned, the definition is still to be clarified. It is a complex product group, but from the Joint Research Center, from a questionnaire published last year, we can already see a list of 14 more specific subgroups that would be tackled or are planned to be tackled first now under the Textile Delegated Act. And in order to follow this Commission preparatory work on textiles, you can actually participate as a stakeholder. I have included here the link in this slide to the activities of the Joint Research Center. So there is ongoing work, and it seems that there will be new targeted consultations for textiles now already, probably in February or then also in April. But as you can see here from the table, details are still to be communicated on the next steps for this preparatory work. But you can sign up as a stakeholder to be kept informed and maybe provide your input. And here you see now then an outlook of the next steps in terms of ESPR adoption and implementation. So we hope that ESPR will be adopted by the end of this quarter. And then ESPR will also directly enter into force after 20 days. And then the work will be progressing on the first working plan and the first ESPR delegated act, which is also likely to include the textiles. And then the application of the delegated act will kick in 18 months after the adoption of the delegated act. So this could be at the earliest by the end of 2026. So, final words, how can companies prepare for ESPR? So you have seen this is complex matter. So you are of course advised to familiarize yourself with the requirements, assess the impact on your products, including your roles under ESPR. You may want to join as a stakeholder. I have mentioned the activities of the Joint Research Center. You can also join CIRPAS for the Digital Product Passport. Maybe you want to get prepared for the provisions on the to prevent the need to destroy unsold consumer products. And of course, overall, you should start raising or continue raising awareness within your company and with your supply chain also on these upcoming challenges. So it's very important to raise awareness. And I have also included here some references for further information for your reading. Some ESPR support services ReachLaw can provide. So we can support you, for example, with the stakeholder consultations, also with the mentioned ESPR impact assessment. And we can also conduct more dedicated training and awareness raising for industry associations and suppliers. And other consulting support is also possible. So with this, I know I have talked quickly. I hope I didn't exceed too much, but I hope this was useful, and thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim, for all the information. It's been quite a lot. I'll quickly try to recap a bit what has been said before we transition to the following speaker. So Tim has been giving us an insight on what's coming up for the ESPR, the Ecodesign Product Regulation. So it's a framework where the Ecodesign requirements for all products that are being placed on the EU market have to comply with. It's about reducing environmental and carbon footprint, but also ensure free movement within the internal market. It's a framework to prevent unsold consumer products being destroyed, and it also encompasses the digital product passport. It affects products from both inside the European Union and imported products, and second-hand products do not have to comply. There is 16 product aspects that are being regulated under the ESPR. That is, among others, energy use, water use, presence of substances of concern, recycled content, and so on. So the criteria for when the requirements get adopted are currently being looked at with different members like NGOs, member state, expert groups, industry, and so on and so forth. Requirements are on performance requirements, information requirements, and eco-design requirements with those substances under that. And then we have the digital product passport that has to have also a web portal actually to make all information accessible and consultable. There is a lot that has to be taken into account. So stakeholders impacted here are manufacturers, EU importers, distributors, and also dealers, so retailers and sellers. They all have their role to play in this, and so non-EU manufacturers are also being impacted. Voila, as Tim said, there is also a role to play for you should you wish to join that group that Tim referred to with the link. Maybe, Tim, you can also put that link in the chat for people to have a look there. All right, so thank you for joining, and also a warm welcome to everyone who just recently joined. We are talking about the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation and the Digital Product Passport. We just listened to Tim Becker, and now we are going to our next expert, who is Romain Ulbrech. Romain will shed his light on the Digital Product Passport. Romain is the Director for Partnerships at Retraced, and his heart really beats for collaboration in sustainable supply chain management. He joined Retraced in 2020 to help transform the global fashion industry. His approach is truly hands-on and focused on suppliers' needs to meet global legislative challenges within the textile industry. Romain will give us some insight on what to expect with respect to the digital product passport. Where are we at with respect to that? And what type of information will actually be collected? And is there any pilot project already that we might have a look at? So without further ado, Romain, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Magali. Yeah, welcome. My name is Roman from Retraced. As Magali mentioned, I will maneuver you through what a digital product passport means. Highly linked to a lot of information Tim also just shared, so it will kind of be of a build up. I will cycle back to some of the parts as it's super crucial to understand what will be part of it, the digital product passport. So let me quickly share my screen. You should all be able to see it. Perfect. Yeah, so maybe to start off, Retraced as a sustainability management, supply chain management tool for fashion and textile companies. We have a lot of experience regarding transparent communication to end consumers. It's how we started 4 years ago, having a solution to connect consumers to supply chain information, to ESG information from supply chain networks of products, which is now part of the ESPR with the digital product passport. But now the future digital passport will go much further. But yeah, I will come to that in a second. First, let's have a look at the digital product passport of today. What is out there, what is already known, what is highly available, because as you might all have seen, there are a multitude of solutions out there in the market who have a digital product passport today. I can say already it's not a EU digital product passport, because the EU digital product passport goes much further and requires much more integration into a multitude of systems, allowing upcycle, or let's say how circular business models in the end. Having a look at our product passport, you can see already that supply chain information data is in there, really having the different actors on the different supply chain levels included, from which we need to retrieve information about materials, products, use of chemicals, etc. And all of this, of course, derives then in the information around the product regarding recycled content, microplastic, hazardous materials, which are part of the product. This is kind of how it is today. What can be done? Requirements on the right-hand side, you can see up, for instance, part of the AGEC law in France, where it's required to kind of communicate about these in a product so that consumers can make more well-established decision in their buying purchases. Coming to the European legislation, kind of giving the framework, the scope on why the digital product passport is going to come. As Magali mentioned in the beginning, Tim mentioned it, the European Green Deal forces us to transform. We need to fight the loss of biodiversity, climate change, etc. All these problems we need to face, and why we have these initiatives of directives, part of the European Green Deal. Part of this is, of course, the Ecodesign for sustainable product regulations, having as goal to improve circular business, or allow circular business models, allow circularity in our economy, and by pushing or improving energy performance and environmental sustainable aspect of products. It's an entire framework on how these things should be done, how products should be produced, what chemicals should be used, which not. Next to that, in order to help the downstream part, so everything what is happening after a product has been sold, is part why the EU digital product passport exists. So it's really to allow this transition into a circular economy providing relevant information, not only to consumers, but specifically to downstream businesses like recyclers, sorters, remanufacturers, so anyone who is going to use these products to bring them back into this loop of our of this life cycle of a product. Putting it on a timeline, where do we stand? Yeah, the final directive has been have been passed, so now it needs to go through this delegated act, which is going to come, meaning we are in this phase of the ESPR is going to be passed soon. Then we will need to adapt it. All of this means it's going to be coming for us, or at least in the next 2 years, so around 26, 27 latest, where the delegated or where the ESPR will need to be adopted by everyone. As mentioned earlier, there's CIRPAS, this consortium, which is already working heavily on the EU DPP. I will come to findings already later in this kind of thing. CIRPAS is kind of a consortium of different actors, consisting of, for instance, Textile Exchange as a multi-stakeholder initiative, RISE, a research institute from Sweden, kind of focusing on sustainable growth. There's the Global Textile Scheme, a lot around data standardization. How is data shared and communicated between different systems? All of this consortium, part of this consortium, are working on establishing the right framework from a practical perspective on how to implement a DPP on a large scale into our industry. So there's still time. Nothing is decided yet. This is super important. Nonetheless, we need to start now to already prepare to it. Now coming to the more, let's say, practical part. What do we know? What we don't know? ESPR is the regulation enforcing the digital product passport, kind of creating the framework for it, kind of showing us what data needs to be included in the digital product passport. As mentioned by Tim earlier, fashion has a huge focus. The JRC identified that fashion and textile is one of the most relevant sectors to initiate ESPR on. So it will be firstly applicable again, meaning we need to adapt and move fast to set the right infrastructure for a DPP that works in our industry, in our market. We know what kind of information will need to be in the DPP. So it will be all information around sustainability, circularity related information for all these businesses I just mentioned formally. It's to ensure that we can retain value of these products later on and ensure, for instance, this recyclability, reusability, remanufacturing. A lot of this data again now will need to come from the upstream supply chain part. So from fabric suppliers, manufacturers, ideally as far and as much information we can retrieve from our upstream supply chain network in order to communicate it to the downstream part. So once it has been sold, and data is lying on different levels here. So of course, at the brand, at the manufacturers, and at the suppliers. As well, what we know is that there will be a data carrier. Nowadays, this can be in form of a QR code, an RFID chip. Important here is it needs to be machine readable. So we would need to transfer data into different systems afterwards in order to make them reusable. So here again, there will be a split between consumer data and business related data in order to transform or work with these products. So here, a lot of things need to be clarified. Wherefore I mentioned earlier, there are products passports out there, but we need to identify in what way these product passports will be able to interact with different system solutions. So it would not just be that we scan it with our phone, but a scanner on a recycling machine or sorting machine would need to be able to kind of scan the DPP as well. as mentioned by Tim as well earlier, the responsibility lies on manufacturers, brands, and retailers, not on the suppliers in the downstream part. So we need to find ways and processes to make the DPP operational into our daily businesses and daily processes. What we know and what we don't know to some extent, there will be one standard protocol how to read out DTP data from the various different stakeholders in order that we make it accessible to a multitude of different parties who need to have access to the data. All right. Now the more interesting part, what do we don't know? Because this is actually a lot. So we actually don't know what data and in what format needs to be collected and then embedded in a DPP. We know, as mentioned, the information groups which will be part of the DPP, but we don't know exactly what data and in what format. Potential track and trace identifiers nothing is defined yet on how we will, for instance, need to prove provenance or ensure that the data which is part of the DPP, where it is coming from, if it is valid or not. All of this will need to be identified. The biggest question mark is the interoperability. So technically, of course, between systems, different technological solutions, between different organizations, and then, of course, from a semantic data perspective, how are we all going to speak the same language regarding the data? How can we take data from one system and have the same language in another system? I'm sure Gabby will talk about it afterwards, but let's say standardization is not a strength suit of the fashion and textile industry as of today. So there's a lot which needs to happen in order to make it more easy so that solutions can exchange data in an efficient way and then exchange in a feasible way. We don't know exactly which attributes it will be. So potential attributes, of course, is which will need to be defined on how we speak. So this goes a bit in the semantic part. Is regarding materials, components, products, recycled content, substance of concerns, environmental footprint profiles. What is required? So for instance, if we take the AGEC law in France, for instance, there it goes also about like who has been part of the supply chain, but we don't, for instance, need to say who was it exactly. It was more about in which country, for instance, the manufacturing has happened, in which country the weaving or the knitting has happened, where the wet processes have happened. So there will need to be a definition on consumer and business side, what attributes and how these attributes should be described in a DPP. Lastly, the data storage part and the access rights, who can access what and in which format, where is data stored. The web portal was just mentioned. It will be a local storage system. There might also be that it's kind of a decentralized approach. So everybody will be kind of responsible to store their own data, but make it accessible to others. And so the question is, when are we obliged in the end to have all this ready? And when are we ready for the unknown and make the changes in a timely manner so that we can comply to the ESPR? This is, of course, the question which will need to be answered soonish, and therefore maybe already what needs to be done next. Rather start thinking early about these topics than later. Coming to the data part, as also mentioned, there's not just the ESPR. There are 16 other legislation forcing us to collect data on a multitude of different aspects. All of this data, which is kind of flowing in here, is coming, of course, from these different levels I mentioned earlier. A lot lies at the brand part. So brands know or can define, for instance, guideline on repairability, reusability of their products. They have PLM system with all the product information. So there's a lot of data already available. Nonetheless, there's a lot of data which is coming from stakeholders where we might not even have a direct business relationship to. So we need to start investigating on how we can better connect with companies from our upstream supply chain network how can we make sure to collect data in a really efficient way? And this is, of course, not just supply chain or product data or chemical information, etc. It could also be that if we look now at CSDDD, that what social or environmental data needs to be collected from companies on a company level. So here's just showing we have to do a lot regarding collection of data and that's why data is kind of the gold of the 21st century. Quickly showing you the 16 groups. Tim also mentioned them before. Let's say the first ones, the durability, reliability, reusability, upgradability, repairability, possibility of maintenance and refurbishment, presence of substance of concern. All of these are controlled by the brand. They know, or they should know all these. So you have them already in your system. So not need to worry so much about these. Nonetheless, the energy use and energy efficiency part, the water use and water efficiency part, when we look at life cycle assessments of products, generally speaking, scope 1 and scope 2 emissions are not as heavy as the scope 3 part. So if we want to really identify the energy usage or the general resource usage of a product, it comes all from the supply chain. And here is, of course, again, super important, and looking at the point 15 of environmental impacts, so carbon environmental footprints, generation of waste, upstream and downstream, of course. To collect the planet emissions neutral, not emissions, but improve our emissions, we need to reduce our emissions along all these different supply chain levels, upstream and downstream. And in order to do so, we need to have primary data in order to be able to make improvements to reduce emissions overall. So we have data, we don't have data, meaning we need to kind of build a bridge and connect these data to one another in order to be able to share it in the end within the DPP. Coming to standardization and systems, it's similar to what Tim showed earlier, this kind of diagram. We know that there will be this identifier on a product. As mentioned here, a QR code might not be the thing. A QR code can really easily be washed off. An RFID chip might be, for instance, from a technical perspective, the better solution. But here, there's no clear guidelines or clear, there's nothing defined yet on how this carrier needs to look like. This carrier will kind of have the digital twin of a product, and having all this relevant information, for instance, be shown to a consumer via phone or machine readable for sorters, recyclers, etc. All of this would be then stored, of course, in a local storage system. This, of course, could be, for instance, retraced or any kind of other server where this data flows in. This server then has all the data around the product, the provenance, traceability, the footprint information, durability, warranty, any compliance documents, certification, REACH declaration, as we mentioned earlier. But in order to have all this information, we need to, of course, collect information from the supply chain. And mainly it will come from the manufacturers and the brands, which are responsible for placing the DPP on the product and kind of making sure that the data in their local storage is the valid and the right one. This, of course, needs to be maintained, ensured for validity. And therefore, of course, it's super relevant to work closely with one's partners on the supply chain part. So all the upstream partners need to be taken on board because they have the most information about the products, specifically in the manufacturing and what chemicals have been used, where something is coming from, and in order, of course, to calculate the environmental footprint. all coming from there. So super relevant to have them on board and have a way to, as mentioned, exchange data with them on an eye-to-eye level, and ensuring that, yeah, this vast amount of data which needs to be collected it's kind of collected in the most efficient way. Yeah, because it's of course a burden for everyone to collect this additional data now. Lastly, nothing is defined yet. This is super important on all what I just said. These are all topics which still need to be answered. They will be tackled by SIRPAs. So the technical specifications around how a DPP will be looking like, we need to stay active and reactive to some extent, and have a solution ready once it is demanded from us. A lot of different organizations are buying into that. Any kind of standardization bodies, like for instance, the Global Textile Scheme regarding product data and material data, industry associations, which are part of that, startups, young companies who are focusing around the DPP or generally transparency in supply chains, NGOs, everybody of these will need to come together to define a certain approach on how to tackle the DPP in an efficient manner. All the technical infrastructure around it needs to be defined. The data points need to be defined, and but already starting to collect data now and having a system with partners now from a network is key in order to be prepared for the challenge which is going to come. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Roman, for your very insightful presentation as well. I'm going to try to summarize very briefly here as well a few aspects that I've been picking up upon. So the digital product passport, at one hand, helps consumers make more sustainable choices. That's at the end of the whole cycle, with information on what recycled content is in my textile, what microplastics, hazardous material as well. But it also really pushes towards a circular business model in the sector. So it includes the downstream parts, what happens when my products get disposed of or are being sold. And so it's not only for consumers, but also for all those parties at the downstream of your value chain. So where do we stand? That's actually what I picked upon also on your last part of the presentation. It's still ongoing work. So it's coming for us in the next 2 or 3 years. You've been diving into what do we know? There's quite some things we already know. So the ESPR enforces that digital product passport. It's a framework for what information to include. And it's about sustainability, circularity, and ensure we retain the value of products for later on. There's a lot to do about data. So the data is to come from upstream your value chain to communicate towards the downstream. There is also been said that a need for a data carrier, but not yet sure what that needs to be. A chip, QR code might be washing away. So there is still a lot to be thought about there. And so the responsibility lies with manufacturers, brands, and retailers. So that digital product passport is really to be included in daily operations and embedded there. A lot we don't know about yet, and that is in full development. So what data, what format, track and trace identifiers, also standardizations, and so on and so forth. So a lot to be discussed still in the upcoming next months, and to be kept an eye on. All right, and then thank you, Roman, for your input. And then we have our last expert, and my pleasure to introduce her to you. So we have Gabrielle Scheiner-Hill for you. She's the co-founder of Bureau 555, and there she's the lead for technology adoption and quality development. She has worked in the design and manufacturing for over 20 years, and she also has a background in training designers and product developers on software to simulate fabrics. She is going to shed her light a bit on how innovation in design with respect to, for instance, virtual fabric sampling can also be a move towards that sustainable new reality. So, Gabrielle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thanks to Roman and Tim, obviously. Amazing information shared there. I'm going to be quite quick because we are also looking to have time with the audience to engage and answer questions as well. So literally a couple of minutes, really kind of giving my background and the space that we are working in and how we believe that the digital twins of textiles can support with this data capture and impact assessment, the kind of the new reality of where we're heading to in textiles. So I won't talk too quickly, but I'm going to whiz through as I can. So just, to introduce myself, Gabby, I'm one of the co-founders of Bureau 555. So we're a digital agency based between Bangladesh and the UK. So our main business is that we create virtual fabrics, digital twins of physical textiles for the fashion supply chain, so we can reduce the fashion industry's textile waste and the associated carbon emissions during the product development process. A lot about what we've been talking about today. Just going to move forward. We were founded in early 2022 by myself and Nusrat. So Nusrat is based in Bangladesh. I'm based here in London. We do come with a wealth of knowledge of textiles. So we've got a combined experience of over 35 years in the supply chain. My background, I'm a trained textile designer with a love of technology. And Nusrat is the director of Hamid Fabrics in Bangladesh, which is a textile mill servicing some of the world's biggest brands and a capacity of around 1 million yards of fabric a month. So we both understand the real and tangible impact of this, that the sampling process has on our industry. I think the audience is a global audience today, but we do know that Bangladesh is a key location for production, obviously, one of the big producing countries, and a key location for digitization. So from the top 10 ready-made garment exporters in the world, Bangladesh has seen the highest growth. Exports hit 11 billion in 23, and it has a global export market share of nearly 8%. So that does make Bangladesh the second largest apparel exporting country behind China and ahead of Vietnam. And we know that Bangladesh is home to over 200 LEED certified factories. So we knew that to work with the supply chain, we had to be in it. So we built and trained our team in Dhaka. And so all scanning and processing can happen as close to source as possible. Just a quick slide on impact. So as I said, we make digital fabrics and garments. So to date, we have created over 3,500 digital twins of physical fabrics. So if we think about this in relation to the physical way of developing the product, you would have created just over 100,000 yards of fabric. And if we use a very conservative carbon calculator, that's equivalent to 1.5 million kgs of CO2, which can be quantified by our brains as the same emissions as driving. About 400 times around the world. So we're a small team of 10 with a big impact, but I think what this shows us is if we can really target in on the impact and understand the impact that our choices within design and development make within textiles, we can have a large impact assessment down the supply chain. So our next step is to partner with a company to collate the LCA data of physical garments versus digital garments, so you can show the full impact and traceability of a digital garment, which will help lead digitization into the legislation and digital product passport conversations that are happening right now. So our belief is that digital textiles have the opportunity to be an essential part of the feedback system that is going to be needed to collect the information we need for the ESPR regulations, the ESPR. Because when we are developing our products, if we can add the master data to the digital asset, then we are collecting the data as we develop our products, rather than retrospectively trying to retrofit the data once the products have been developed. So we know for this legislation, it's for new product going forward. We're looking at it hitting the market, in 2026? But we know how long it also takes to bring products to market. So we need to be realistic around that. So just quickly, we do need to engage lots of different areas. So we need to work with industry, academia and technology to see this change. So we work with universities across the UK and in Bangladesh, Dhaka University, Bangladesh University of Textiles and NITA, to engage a wider audience that's within the supply chain as well. I'm going to leave it there for now so we can address some of the questions that we've got in the chat. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to this discussion with Tim and Roman and the audience.
All right, thank you, Gabby, for that quick overview. And I've heard actually that the digital textiles can be an essential part of the feedback system. We need to also hit the targets that are being presented now within the ESPR. So I've heard that you work with digital twins, and so that virtual fabric actually also can reduce textile waste and emissions of carbon. That immediately leads to high impact, actually, within the framework of what we've been talking about today. So yeah, the choices of design and development on your supply chain are also something to really consider within the topic we're talking about. So thank you for your contribution there. And then we open the floor for the discussion. So I would like to ask Roman and Tim to join me here on our virtual stage. There they are. Welcome. And so I'd like to start maybe with a question from the audience. And there is a question here. So with a higher, for Tim, actually, with a higher content of recycled fibers, the functionality of products is reduced. So how to cover this aspect of what might seem a conflicting goal with durability, longevity, and recycled content?
Yes, yeah, I have seen this question, and of course, I have seen also when studying this that this is a concern for the textile sector. Also, inclusion of recycled content into new products. Also, so as you may have seen during my presentation, there are some negative criteria that are to be followed by the European Commission when developing eco-design requirements. And one of those criteria also relates to the functionality, which should not be significantly impacted in a negative way of the product. So I think this is where these kind of aspects will tie in, so that the proper balance is being found. I mean, it's probably not the aim that the eco-design requirements will significantly impact the product quality in a negative way. So, and also this has to be, of course, then brought forward by the stakeholders during the stakeholder consultations and in the eco-design forum.
Yeah. All right. So it's actually covered within that functionality requirement. That's
so.
Yeah. All right. Roman, there are already companies offering products with a digital product passport. And one of the questions of the audience is, on which guidelines and information are they based on today? And yeah, is that sufficient for now? And how will that evolve?
So for consumers, I think being transparent as a company is already a good step forward. There are no clear guidelines. So as I mentioned earlier, there is, not on a wider scale. Let's say for France, there is this obligation to inform consumers about where the manufacturing, where the wet processes have happened for a product, but only, again, just sharing the country, so no real information about which company exactly, so not having verified information behind it to some extent, so it's really vague. And there will something be coming with an environmental footprint, but also they are still evaluating what will be the methodology around it. So in the end, anyone can communicate what they want today. You can be as transparent as you want. As mentioned, we started out as a transparency solution back in the days. We showed full transparency. We even kind of transformed information about certification audits, which are lying on a company level in supply chains, into certain badges to make it more consumer friendly, to understand what actually means a REACH declaration, or what is an SA 8000, what does it lead to. So kind of bridging towards the consumers to make it more easily understandable. But as of today, everybody can do what they want to some extent.
Okay.
In the green claims aspect, ideally you prove what your claims you make, or you have a certain verification for it, which we always did in the past, because we gather data from participants from the upstream supply chain part. And by having this data, you have also certain proof always connected to it. So, yeah. But in the end, you can actually really do what you like. That's why the framework is going to be so good.
Yeah.
We all work and speak the same.
regulated, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's already a benefit there. So all information gets regulated, and we know actually what we're looking at. However, there's still a lot of work still to do with respect to that standardization. But Gabby, what other benefits do you see in the upcoming regulations, specifically for brands and suppliers, apart from the transparency in what we look at?
For sure, yeah. I mean, I completely echo Roman's comment there that actually the sort of like the level playing field will allow everyone to actually report to the same level right now, as opposed to someone reporting here and someone reporting here and someone wanting to report but not being able to. So speaking from the supply chain side, from the manufacturers and then down into the mills as well, textile mills that can provide clear data about their production and their operations really have the opportunity to position themselves as a really beneficial partner within the supply chain, and actually almost add an extra level of value to being a supply chain partner. If we think, I'm from the textile industry, we love standards. We're a big fan, right? We love an ISO standard. We love our fabric test reports. We collect the data. The data is ready in some instances, but at the moment, obviously, mills are being asked to deliver it into lots of different systems with no level playing field. So on our side, from like the mill side, rather than garment manufacturers, but from the mill side, standardization is a really positive thing, because then it's saying, right, this is who we are, this is our data, this is our information, and here it is for you to then aggregate and put into the systems. What's going to be interesting is then obviously the relationship between the mills and manufacturers, which is quite a hierarchical power dynamic. The garment manufacturers, usually have the relationship with the brands, and then it trickles down to the mills. So then the mills have the opportunity to become heavier players. I'm not talking about like the big luxury mills that we all know about and that have the name. I'm talking about like the powerhouse mills in all the producing countries that are there making those, millions of meters, have the opportunity. So on our side, I would and also a level of trust as well, because you're providing data in a certain format that is going into a regulated system that maybe can't be skewed or moved or prepared in a certain way to promote other. I'm trying to be very diplomatic, but essentially it means that the mills hopefully will have more of a footing in this. And if you're a vertical manufacturer, then that is really, really interesting, because obviously you can see down the chain.
Yeah. All right. So with respect to benefits, I hear standardization, which is a good thing, that everyone actually speaks the same language. The relationships between all partners in the value chain are being, there is a chance for those relationships to actually change, and mills with respect to manufacturers, trust, and then, transparency. Roman and Tim, are there any other advantages still that we're missing here that you can immediately think of?
You want to go first, Tim?
Yep, go ahead, Roman.
All right. So I think what Gabby said is the big game changer, the big industry changer, because as we mentioned, the brand manufacturers, but let's say the brand and retailers are mainly responsible to put a digital product passport, or ensuring that their partners, their direct business partners, are putting it on a product, making sure that the right data is in it. So it's their products, they are selling it to consumers, and they are putting it into the downstream life cycle. So they are responsible for it. However, what Gabby said, the data lies at a completely different location, or most of the data lies somewhere completely else, where they don't have direct connections to, maybe. So it will change the way on how we are working together. It can even go further, that we say, okay, direct business partners, what is with the indirect ones, which come upper in the supply chain? It is a regulation pushing a complete change in the industry on how companies are working together, and giving them, in theory, let's say the weaker parts, more power, as they are required to help the brands to comply to these laws.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the brands will not be able to comply.
Yeah.
And they will not be able to do it alone. So, yeah.
Indeed.
So
So everyone in the value chain actually gets to play a part, and we have to rely on each other more heavily there, which allows things to balance out. So that means, yeah, we're talking about value chain. That's not only EU, but also non-EU manufacturers are being, targeted, can I say so, with this ESPR. So Tim, what is your vision on that? Like the importance of ESPR and then the impact of ESPR. It's ESPR, right? Yeah.
ESPR, indeed.
Yeah, I was doubting, is it EPS? No, I was, anyway, the impact of ESPR for non-EU manufacturers, what are we to expect there?
Yeah, I mean, it cannot be underestimated, especially for the textile sector, because it relies so heavily also on the import of products to the European Union. And the manufacturer definition in ESPR has been intentionally left open. Yeah, it is not restricted to EU entities, so it covers entities regardless of their location who market products, of course, for the EU market. And so we can also see from the ESPR, from the legal text, that actually when defining eco-design requirements, the Commission should take into account the impact on third countries and third country operators. So that is clearly to be taken into consideration when preparing the delegated acts. So therefore, also my call to involve and for non-EU parties to involve themselves in the discussions as far as they can already. Of course, when we are then looking at the enforcement of the regulations later on, it will be difficult or impossible to reach out to the non-EU producers. So there, the main counterpart will indeed be the importers on the EU side and the distributors, with whom then the customs authorities and the market surveillance authorities are dealing. So it will be for the importers to make sure that the manufacturer has done their work properly.
Right. And then we again are at that importance of everyone that has to play his role to make sure the whole value chain is actually complying. So, okay, Gabby, during our preparatory calls, actually, you mentioned within this framework, like that non-EU manufacturers and the impact on them, that it's also a matter of understanding where responsibilities start and where they stop. Could you comment on that?
Commenting legally on it, I mean, in the sense of it's a lot of it is obviously down to the relationships that the brands and manufacturers have with their mills, because actually it depends in, I think, what section of the industry you're working in. I've worked a lot in large volume, so large volume retailers often have really close relationships with the mills that they are working with, because if you're buying 100,000 plus meters, you're buying that from someone that has been closely and clearly audited. So it depends on, I guess, how close your relationship is with your supply chain. And I think what we might find, sorry if I'm veered off slightly, what we might find is obviously within the mills, we're hoping to see that there'll be a sharing of data between brands and retailers, because if you're obviously creating that data once, you can create it once. Don't have to create it 3 or 4 times for 3 or 4 different brands. You just want to create it once and then give it out, which right now isn't happening at the moment. Sorry, I don't think I answered your question exactly.
No worries there. So my question was about responsibility and where does it start and where does it stops, actually, but with that responsibility is, of course, yeah. But go ahead, I see you.
I mean, thinking about responsibility, actually, right, mills don't make textiles for the fun of it, right? They are answering a contract. So they are being developed. They're developing those textiles and those products because of an order, which means that the responsibility for making those choices of what fibers go into those textiles lies with the brands, the buyers, the designers, the product developers, the fabric sources, the strategy of the business. That's where, so the responsibility of decision lies with the brands, and then they're placing those orders. so that's exactly where it lands. If you ask me, the responsibility comes down to the buyers and the brands. Sorry, buyers. Because obviously the mills are just fulfilling those orders. So fiber choices, recyclability, durability, no longer will buyers just be able to select the textile that is on trend and most well priced. Many other decisions will have to be considered when product developing and selecting those textiles.
Right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So time is running so fast. I'd love to just keep on talking, but looking at the time, I would like to ask still, knowing what's coming up, like what has been presented on today, where can brands, manufacturers, suppliers, retailers start? What, in your opinion, and each one of you, what in your opinion is the first step or most important to take into account today, January 31st? Roman.
Thank you, Margari, for the question. It's getting started in the data collection. I think changing takes time, and changing, because what Gabby just said, right? The main purpose of a mill or manufacturer is to produce products, not to collect data in a manner to be able to share it as well. So it's kind of additional resources which will be needed in order to share this data and pass it over to the brands and retailers on a certain location. So it can be embedded in a digital product passport, for instance. It's the same when we look at traceability. So it's more work. Everything means more work. And if you just start to work more in 2 years when you need to, you will not be ready. So it's, I think, starting today and trying to find ways on how operationally being able to cope with this extra work. This is someone needs, even if we don't know what data it's going to be, starting to collect data, environmental data, helping maybe also partners about what is their energy consumption yearly, what is water consumption, etc. As mentioned, there are the mills which are the superstars which have everything ready, but then there are, I would say, 90% of the rest of the industry which have no clue. And I know from my experience that data quality is not always the best in fashion and textile. And we need to standardize a lot. So making learnings today is good to be ready for the future, I would say.
Yeah, and I hear make sure you map actually the resources you need for you to be able to become compliant, like resources to do that extra work. All right, Tim.
Well, of course, being a lawyer, I would like to place a clear emphasis also on studying the legal text. There's no way around that. I think, because that's the bottom line of ESPR. There is a long list of rationales of where they first explain the reasons why they introduce all of this. So this is very useful to read. So read the legal text, analyze the potential impact for your products. I've seen also many questions on this destruction of unsold consumer products. So this seems to be a new complex area arising. So companies need to figure out how they are impacted by that. And then, of course, as I mentioned, participate in the stakeholder as a stakeholder in the relevant activities. That's crucial, because I would rather see this as a co-creation process, these eco-design requirements. It will not be like unilaterally placed by the European Commission. But that's why they have this multi-stakeholder eco-design forum, which will be established in the future. And I have also already sent to you some links where you can currently participate. So keep track and try to understand what has just been developed.
Yeah. So study the text, know where you are at, like what's the basis, and then try to keep up by following along in that stakeholder participation, but maybe also other channels and forums that out there. I know GIZ and PSD and GIZ Fabric, they're there also to support all stakeholders in this process. So don't hesitate to also reach out to them. And Gabby, what in your opinion is an important first step?
Yeah, so on my side, it's engaging all business units within your business, because to collect all of this information and to bring everything together. It's not just the sustainability team, if you're lucky enough to have one person sat in the corner, or even maybe just, you know, the merchandiser, which is quite often the person in the mill. So it's finance, it's IT, it's merchandising, it's product development, it's technical. So everyone within your business needs to be moving towards this. And I think honestly, get IT on board now, because they're going to be your best friend for collecting this. Because if you can give them the data, then they can at least clean it for you. You know, however it needs to be. Data integrity is going to be massive. So yeah, get finance, IT, get everyone on board, as well as obviously Tim and Roman's other comments as well.
Yeah. All right. So I hear resources. Make sure you have everyone on board in the company and study the text, know what's coming, and make sure that you stay on top of things by just following along. All right. I have to wrap up this discussion here, but thank you so much for your input, but also for being here and answering all the questions, not only in the discussion, but in the chat as well. And also thank you for having with us in the last hour and a half. There's been shared a lot of information. No worries, the recording will be made available together with the presentation. If I'm not mistaken, a colleague of GIZ will still introduce the following webinar. Is that correct? I'm looking at my colleagues here.
I can do that quickly, Magali. And
Okay,
I think
thank you, Judith.
we have a slide prepared, a last slide. I'm very much looking forward to a webinar on waste legislation, on EU waste legislation. We will focus on the Waste Framework Directive, and particularly the extended producer responsibility. This will be next week, this Wednesday, the 7th of February. We will start at the same time, 10 a.m. CT. And so that's the next week. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of you there and learn more about EU waste legislation. Thank you.
Right. And before you all go, I would also like to ask you to fill in the feedback form that is being shared in the comments. Based on your feedback, we can optimize our offering towards you. We can learn about what we can do better, but also learn about what needs to come up next. So please fill in the feedback form. And thank you so much for having been with us. And we hope to see you next week. Bye.